Los Angeles, 1986. A young woman is found brutally murdered in her own home. The crime scene suggested a violent burglary. But beneath the surface, something far more sinister was lurking. For more than 2 decades, her killer evaded justice, protected by the very badge sworn to uphold the law. This is the story of Sherri Rasmussen and the LAPD detective who murdered her. Sherri Rasmussen was only 29 years old. A nursing director at Glendale Adventist Medical Center, she was already admired for her intelligence, compassion, and leadership. Colleagues described her as the kind of nurse who gave her all to patients and to her team. Outside of work, Sherri was deeply in love. In 1985, she married John Ruetten, a handsome young engineer she had met in college. Together, they seemed to have the perfect life ahead of them. But not everything was perfect. John had an ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Lazarus, who had never fully let go. Stephanie wasn't just any ex. She was an LAPD officer, confident, ambitious, and increasingly obsessed with John. Sherri confided in her family that Lazarus had shown up uninvited at their condo, demanding to talk. Another time, she confronted Sherri at work, warning her to stay away from John. Sherri was worried, but at the time, she had no idea just how far Lazarus would go. On February 24, 1986, Sherri stayed home from work, feeling unwell. That evening, John returned to a scene of horror. The condo had been ransacked. Sherri's lifeless body lay in the living room. She had been brutally beaten, bitten, and shot 3 times in the chest. Her face was swollen from the attack, and a bloody bite mark was left on her arm, a detail that would later become crucial. Police arrived quickly. Their theory, a burglary gone wrong. Jewelry was missing, electronics had been moved. It looked like a robbery. But Sherri's father, Nels Rasmussen, immediately raised concerns. He told investigators about Stephanie Lazarus, John's jealous ex. He warned them, "This girl is dangerous." Still, police dismissed the idea. After all, Lazarus was one of their own. The LAPD locked onto the burglary theory. They speculated that 2 men had broken in while Sherri was home, but the evidence didn't quite add up. Sherri was shot with a .38 caliber weapon, the same type issued to LAPD officers. The bite mark on her arm suggested the attacker was female, and Lazarus's obsession with John was no secret. Despite this, investigators never questioned Lazarus. In fact, reports of her stalking behavior were quietly brushed aside. The burglary theory remained the official line. For Sherri's family, it was a nightmare. They mourned their daughter while believing the real killer was walking free, and they were right. Over time, the case grew cold. Files gathered dust, evidence was boxed away, and Stephanie Lazarus continued her career at the LAPD, eventually rising to the rank of detective in the art theft division. In 2005, nearly 2 decades later, cold case detectives took another look at Sherri's file. Advances in DNA technology gave them a chance to retest old evidence. The bite mark swab, stored since 1986, was analyzed again. This time, results showed something shocking. The DNA came from a female suspect. That single detail shattered the burglary theory. Suddenly, all eyes turned back to the one person police had ignored, Stephanie Lazarus. Detectives began a quiet surveillance operation. They needed Lazarus's DNA for confirmation. One afternoon, they followed her to a Starbucks. After she finished her drink, officers retrieved her discarded straw. The results came back conclusive. The DNA matched. Stephanie Lazarus had bitten Sherri Rasmussen during the attack. In June 2009, after 23 years of freedom, Stephanie Lazarus was arrested at LAPD headquarters. Colleagues were stunned. At her trial in 2012, prosecutors laid out a chilling story. Lazarus, consumed by jealousy, confronted Sherri at her home. She beat her, bit her, and then shot her 3 times before staging the scene to look like a burglary. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA from the bite mark, ballistics linking her service revolver, testimonies of Lazarus stalking John and threatening Sherri. Her defense team argued the case was built on circumstantial evidence, and mishandled files. But the jury wasn't convinced. On March 8, 2012, Stephanie Lazarus was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. Justice, at last, for Sherri Rasmussen. For Sherri's family, the verdict brought bittersweet relief. They had waited more than 2 decades for answers. The case also raised troubling questions about the LAPD. How could an officer slip through the cracks for so long? Did the department protect one of their own at the expense of justice? Today, Sherri Rasmussen is remembered not for her tragic death, but for her life, as a brilliant nurse, a loving daughter, and a woman whose light was stolen too soon. In the end, her case is a powerful reminder: no one is above the law, not even those who wear the badge.